A lot of us have been studying together on Wednesday nights. We've been studying Jewish mysticism, and we've been studying it in this collection called Jewish Mysticism and the Spiritual Life, Classical Texts, Contemporary Reflections. I know, right? That's a mouthful. So we've been studying these texts together, and we've been explicating them and working with them and figuring out how they apply to our own lives, because to study Jewish mysticism as kind of a intellectual engagement is lovely. I'm not real sure. It has a lot to do with our daily lived Jewish lives. So for those of you who are here expecting to understand Jewish mysticism when you leave, I'm going to give you enough background, enough concept, enough language to know something about what happens with the text, what happens with the ideas of the mystics as we see it translated through the lens of Hasidism, and as it is lived in, everyday lives of Jews who are struggling to make sense of it. So if you really want to know more about this topic and how it speaks to us, particularly as non-Orthodox Jews, as Reconstructionist Jews, I'm going to tell you that you should buy a book by Rabbi Arthur Green. He was once president, while you get your pens out, he was once president of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. He was president of the seminary and a leading teacher and thinker. You'll see him all over our prayer book. He has comments above and below the line. And he's a very prolific thinker and writer. Rabbi Arthur Green wrote a book called Ehyeh. Don't worry. Ehyeh. Ehyeh. Ehyeh, a Kabbalah for tomorrow. I think. Or today, or something. So it is one of the best books I have ever read on why Kabbalah should matter to us. Like, what in the world would we do with these ideas of the Kabbalists? So when I say to you Kabbalah, what do you think? When I say Jewish mysticism, what do you think?
I think of numbers.
You think of numbers.
And how numbers relate words and letters and...
Gematria.
So, numbers has a very specific science in Jewish mystical practice, in Jewish mystical tradition, and it is called gematria. Gematria is about taking every letter of the Hebrew alphabet and applying a number to it. Before Roman numerals, how did they make a grocery list? Before Roman numerals, what would you have done?
Well, if you needed two of something, you would write bet something.
So you would delineate it by letter. A, get eggs. B, don't forget yogurt. C, right, dog food. So you would use letters to enumerate, right, things on a list or to represent an amount of things. So it is with the Hebrew alphabet. So they used Aleph, Bet, Gimel, they assign numbers to those letters. So if you take a Hebrew word, every Hebrew word, and you already know one in Gematria, by the way. I'm sorry? Chai. Excellent. Chai is Chet. Chet has the value of Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet. 8. And Yud is what? 10. So Chet and Yud, the word Chai, the word life, has a value in Gematria of 18. This is why whenever you say give a gift, you're going to give twice Chai. Like, what is that? Twice Chai, right? It's twice 18 because the Chet and the Yud, when you add them together, make 18. This is a huge science in Kabbalah. Why? Because my name is Rachel. So if you add the value of Resh, Chet, Lamed, Rachel, you're going to get a value. You're going to get a number. Any other word in Hebrew that has that same number, regardless of what letters makes it up, that word must have something to do with Rachel, by definition. God created the world with language. God created the world through speech. It was, of course, Hebrew speech, right? Vayehi or, let there be light. So already. Or there's got to be a number for that. And then anything that matches that number is connected by definition to light. So then there's a huge study of all, and a wonderful playfulness about studying all those numerical connections, and then what are the things that we read into that. So Gematria is part of Kabbalah. What else do you know about Kabbalah?
Sephirot,
the Sphirot, the 10 emanations of God. You've all heard of the Sphirot?
No.
Nope. Okay. So 10 Sphirot. Excellent. You're going to hear about them before you leave. The 10 Sphirot, we're going to talk about those. What else do you know? What does Kabbalah mean?
Hidden knowledge.
What is received? What is received? So what is received? What is Kabbalah?
10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments.
Surely we received those. Hopefully, Ellen, we remember the 10 Commandments, right? So we received those, right? What's received is texts, wisdom, knowledge about practice. Torah is received, right? So when someone says, have you studied Kabbalah? The question already doesn't make sense. Have you studied that which is received? I hope so, right? Or I don't know what I've been doing with my time, right? So studying Kabbalah, like there isn't one text that is Kabbalah, the Jewish book called Kabbalah with a capital K, right? Kabbalah is that which is received. And Kabbalah was always understood to be both a study and a practice. And it was never, by the way, outside of normative Jewish practice. Ever. Ever, 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 ever. There is no way to understand Jewish mysticism outside of normative Jewish practice. It's like icing. But you have to have cake, right? No one eats just icing. Well, all right. Madonna eats just icing, right? Is it really a frosted cake? No. You can call this a frosted cake. It remains sugar congealed with lots of other chemicals, right? It doesn't change the fact that it's just icing. You can do that, but you miss the heart, you miss the substance of what Kabbalah is coming to talk about. So Richard, help me by please passing half to this side, and I'll pass half to this side. If you'll take one and pass it, but leave me one, because I don't have the original. You're going to turn to page 20, which is the not Sphira page, the other page, the just text page. And Mark is going to read for us from Rabbi Arthur Green from his book Ehyeh. He's going to read that first paragraph for us. Mark, go ahead. The basic teaching.
The basic teaching of mystics, dressed in the garb of many traditions, is essentially this simple message. There is only one. All multiplicity of beings and their sense of separateness or distance from one another are either illusion or represents a less than ultimate truth. This is especially the case in the language of Western mysticism, and the great alienation or sense of distance that humans feel between themselves and God.
All right, so Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, Rabbi Green is asserting, is no different than any other form of mysticism. Heresy. It's so special. Really? Really? The basic teaching of mystics, dressed in the garb of many traditions, is essentially this simple message. There is only one. Capital O. That's it. You may now go home. Enjoy your family's.
The rest is commentary.
There's only one. This truly is the message of every mystical tradition, and there's lots of wonderful things that come after this assertion and after this understanding and after practices that lead one to experience this understanding. There's lots of gorgeousness that happens through text and language and the Hebrew language and Jewish history and how that applies to how we understand those texts. All of that is fantastically gorgeous, and it's the same in Buddhism and Hinduism and every other tradition that has a mystical element. Really, it comes back to this. How do we remember? How do we remind ourselves? How do we engage in practices that bring us back to the knowing, the true knowing that everything is one, capital O? If anyone asks you what is Kabbalah, you now have your elevator answer, and truly it is not an oversimplification. This is the point. Everything else is illusion. So there is only one. All multiplicity of beings and their sense of separateness or distance from one another are either illusion or represent a less than ultimate truth. It does not mean we are not unique. It does not mean we don't have individual experiences. It does not mean we don't have histories and temperaments and different historical eras that we live in that then influence what happens with those gifts and talents and challenges. But if we believe they are truly separate, according to the mystical tradition, any mystical tradition ultimately, that's illusion or less than the ultimate truth. It may be a truth, but it's like not the big truth. What is the big truth?
There's only one.
Thank you. This is especially the case in the language of Western mysticism, in the great alienation or sense of distance that humans feel between themselves and God. Why is this unique to the West, do you think? What do you think Rabbi Green is suggesting?
Well, I'll speak of Japanese culture and kids, students my age, around 5 and 6. They still with their parents. Everybody kind of stays together. Family's just family. Forever. Nobody goes anywhere.
Family's family. I'm part of family, so why would I leave when I'm part of this organism that we call family? Pretty much, right?
Family's just number one until they die.
Family's number one till they die. They're part of a larger system. They understand themselves as located in a system that they're a part of it, they're a unique part of it, they're a distinct part of it, but they're a part of it. Right?
Sometimes they lose it.
Sometimes they, right, of course. So we're not going to attach value right now, either way, right? We're going to say, that's an understanding that's very different from the West. What does the West celebrate? Individuals. Individualism, I would go so far as to say, with all of its benefits and all of its stresses and all of its deficiencies. Richard?
But I think you could also, while you can implicate individualism as a potential source of the alienation that people largely in the West feel, I think it's also largely the Western tradition of rationalism, which emerged in the 16th, 17th century, that is also largely at the root of a lot of alienation.
So part of the alienation that Richard is lifting up is that there was a split that happened in a place called Greece. And the philosophers, the thought leaders in Greece, posited that there was the perfect pen, and the only perfect pen is the idea pen. Every pen that is in actual existence is by definition flawed, because it is in the material world. It is a pen. And any pen is not really pen. The real pen is the idea pen. That's the ideal pen. So this is Neo-Aristotelianism, Neoplatonism that we see affecting so much of the thought in the West, which then bifurcates the material world and the spiritual world. That's right. So the world of ideas, the world of abstraction, the world of thought, the world of not material becomes the ideal. It is perfection. And everything that is part of the material, lived, physical world, the natural world, is by definition flawed. This is a split that Judaism never bought. It is a split that is after Judaism. I mean, Judaism continues, of course, and Jewish thought emerges and evolves, and Maimonides and other people like him are very influenced by Neo-Aristotelian thought and Neoplatonism. But for the most part, Jewish tradition never bought the idea that the material and the spiritual were somehow separate. Kabbalah is very much about reinvigorating, reanimating the connection between body and spirit. Spending a lot of time reflecting, spending a lot of time in embodied practice, spending a lot of time with the mind and the heart and the soul as one approaches eating, for instance, is a way to constantly reinforce, oh right, I'm not just eating, I am performing a spiritual act by eating. And if I eat with the proper spiritual intention, I can lift up the divine in this food, and when I eat it, I liberate that divineness of that food, and it goes back to the divine source, and the divine source is further unified in that experience. Why does it need to be unified?
Can you repeat that?
Sure. I'm a little backwards, but it's okay. That's how it goes. So when I eat, because I'm hungry and I just want to fill myself up, there's nothing wrong with that. That is a good thing. We are human beings. We are created with an appetite. We are created to eat. We have food that's created for us to eat. Isn't that wonderful? We're supposed to say a blessing, the rabbis taught us way early on. We're supposed to say a blessing because that's been given to us as a gift. And if you don't say thank you for a gift, in rabbinic terms, you are in fact stealing. You must say thank you for this food, or else you are stealing from God. You are stealing from the universe. So when you say a blessing, then you eat that food in holiness, and that's a wonderful thing. But the mystics took it one step further. How do we further bring our spiritual selves to this act of eating? We actually sit with great intention before we eat. In quiet, maybe. Reflecting on hunger. Reflecting on how many in this world are hungry. Reflecting on the nature of ourselves as beings that get hungry. Appetite. And then what it means to approach the gift of nourishment. What went into creating that nourishment for us. How fortunate we are. Well, go on as long, 15 minutes go on with this. And with deep gratitude to eat, according to the mystical tradition, when one eats like that, one liberates the divinity within that food, because the divine is everywhere, in everything. One liberates the divinity within that food, it returns to its source, and you have now helped the Holy One be more whole. Dana?
So, I heard you say intention, and the mystics, intention has to do with the mystics, but I was thinking about kavanah when we pray, and in our prayer book. So,
same thing. Because one can speed mumble daven all the way through Shachrit, through the morning service, and okay, every single syllable came out of my mouth. I'm Yotzei, I could get the check in the big black book, because I said every syllable of the morning service in Hebrew. Okay. Is that prayer? According to the rabbis, yes, you fulfill the definition of prayer. For the mystics, ma pitom, absolutely not. For the mystics, no, not until you come to prayer with an intention. Till you soak up the meaning of every word and bring that fully into that experience. Yes? So, one, yes, is prayer. For the mystics, no. Yes, every Jew should do that, and that's fine if that's all Jews do, but there's another level, there's a deeper level of prayer that is the mystical experience. And that for some people, should be the goal. Not everybody, and we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Would you say that gratitude is the only way to liberate the divine?
Or there's lots of wonderful ways to liberate the divine. One is like we said, intention to do so. Right? I'm going to eat with the intention of approaching the divine in this food as it connects with the divine in me. Because there was a thing that happened called Shvira. What is Shvira? Lishbor. Lishbor is to break. Shvira, breakage, shattering. So the Garden of Eden is one way to understand the creation of the world, the creation of the universe. But for the people who really know what happened, here's the story. Everything was God. Ein Sof. No end to the divine. No end to God. Everything was God and God was everything. If God was everything, then there's no way for the universe to exist because God is everything. And God takes up all the space, as it were. If we can just get our heads around a concept like space when there's no space and time. So, like before the Big Bang. Like, okay, how do you talk about pre-Big Bang? Like, I don't know. I don't even know how we talk about the Big Bang, but that's somebody else's problem. So, Shvira. So, there's this, God is everything, and then something happens, and God starts to emanate out of God's self to do something else, to have something else happen. We don't know why. I have a theory, but we don't know. I'll tell you my theory if you want to hear it later, but we don't know why. And then there's no place for that to exist. So God does this loving act of what we call tzimtzum, self-contraction. God contracts God's self so that there is space. One of my teachers, I loved their description, is that if everything is God, Ein Sof, no end, then what does God do? God lovingly contracts to the sides and leaves space in the donut for a hole. And that hole is the space that the universe is gonna take up. So God goes and does a loving act of tzimtzum, we don't know why, and then spills God's self into vessels. God's light is going to pour into vessels. Those vessels, for some reason we don't know, there's a cosmic accident, and they shatter. And the divine light goes flying everywhere. We have the created world here. And the shards of those vessels are the material. So every time we approach a piece of food, it's a shard. That means there's a divine spark of light in it. And when we approach eating with the right intention, we liberate that spark, that nitzatza, back to the source. Okay. Take it or leave it. Doesn't matter. This is the Kabbalistic system we're working with. So for them, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because that's not the point. The point is that's the underlying truth for them of everything. So everything we approach in the physical world has the opportunity to become a sacred experience of liberating the sparks. So when you hear tikkun olam, tikkun from what? What does tikkun mean? Repair. Repair of what? Of the shvira.
The brokenness.
The brokenness. That's the brokenness they're talking about. We are here to help repair the shvira that happened, the cosmic accident that happened, that gloriously resulted in all of this. So that's kind of the underlying understanding of the Kabbalists, of any Jewish mysticism that we're dealing with. And that makes, and the point I want to make from that is that the divine is right here, right now, accessible to every single one of us. It is not some lofty thing. It is not some idea. It is not an abstraction. It is right here. It is in that table. It's in every human being in a different way, magnified, bigger, fuller. It's everywhere. And it's up to us to interact with the world in such a way that we are about repair and liberation of those sparks back to its source. I've given you on the other side a diagram because there are flavors to the emanation of God into the world. We're not going to spend time on them tonight. If you want to, we can in the future. Each of them has its own quality. And for the Kabbalists, they break the world and every experience into these 10 flavors, these 10 different ways of having the divine manifest in the world. So you'll hear these terms used a lot by the Kabbalists. Most of the texts that we get in Kabbalah are inaccessible to us. So if you thought I was going to give you the text on Kabbalah and begin paragraph 1 of it tonight, most of them are inexplicable to us. How many of you can open a math book to the section on trigonometry and understand it? Richard, I know you can. You could teach it, which is a little distressing. But most of us, those are symbols that mean, we know they mean something. We have absolutely no idea what they mean. But we know if we got a math professor in here, he would go on and on and on and on and on and on about what only 3 of those symbols meant. And then when you talk about those symbols in relationship to each other, one of them times the other one of them to the power of the other one, oh my God, right, I start to have heart palpitations. Really then you get really excited, right? Right, so, because they're like, oh, this is so cool, watch how this one interacts. What? So this, for the mystics, is how they write their texts. They'll say, oh my gosh, when Bina meets Chochmah, and it results in Chesed, and when that Chesed bumps up against Din and Gevura, watch what happens. And you're like, you can translate those words, pi, function, division, you can translate them. It does not help you understand one thing about what they're talking about. They write in code, partly because they are aficionados. They are adepts. Thank you. They are adepts, Harry Potter language, right? They are adepts at this stuff. We are below novices. And not everybody is supposed to have access to this knowledge. Why? Why do they care who has access to this?
Well, my understanding is there used to be maybe there still is, a tradition, say, within Orthodoxy, that you shouldn't start studying Kabbalah until you've basically studied everything else there is, because Kabbalah can be such going down a rabbit hole that if you spend all your time on Kabbalah, you're not going to be paying enough attention to all the stuff that you really should have been learning before you started on Kabbalah.
Why should have? Why you wouldn't be paying attention to the stuff you should have been learning? Why not just learn Kabbalah? It's the icing. And what's the danger in eating only icing? A diabetic coma.
Yeah. Or insane.
Or what?
Or insane.
Or insane, right? So, which are very similar things from what I've heard. So you can eat only one of those things, but if you do that and don't have the nourishment underneath it, it takes you to places that are not healthy. And so the Kabbalists really understood that you had to have a grounding in other texts, other experiences, and not just texts and not just knowledge, by the way. You had to be grounded in life. Why? 40, male, married, with children. That's when you can study Kabbalah. Why? Why not be a Jewish scholar who's 27, genius, learned all the other stuff, and is now an expert in Kabbalah? Why not?
Some satisfaction in life when you have all those things.
So satisfaction in life is important? Understanding, experience, relationships. Why are all those important before you study Kabbalah and become proficient in Kabbalah? Why? Why does it matter?
It's icing otherwise.
Okay, so you're eating icing otherwise. So we talked about a diabetic coma. How did those things fight a diabetic coma?
Well, they're the protein. They're the building blocks. That's how you release the divine back into
So you have to have some concrete in order to actually do what Kabbalah is asking you to do. That's part of it.
I don't really understand what Kabbalah is, but it sounds as if you couldn't grasp it if you don't have an experience that it is talking about.
So if you don't have the experience, you can't really understand what it's actually really talking about. That's on the one hand, it would only be abstract knowledge. That, to the Kabbalist, is dangerous. Why?
You can get lost. You can get lost in Kabbalah so that you're not attached to what's around you anymore.
That's exactly right. If you're not attached to a wife who's going to nag you, it's time to put the book down. And children, daddy, come play with me, because it had to be daddy. I have to remember that, right? You might actually float away. You might get lost in this abstraction. And it's not saying that that in itself is dangerous. It's saying that is not what we want. That's important. If you take nothing else from this night, take that. That is not the point. We do not have monasteries. We don't. Why? Because we do not believe that going away somewhere and understanding esoteric truths and getting lost in them and spending one's life in them, Judaism does not understand that to be a good or desirable thing. You should love somebody. They should love you back. They should feed you. You should eat it. You should feed the toddler while she's making the next course, right? You should be part of this world. It's not about spiritual abstraction. It's about this world. And if those experiences don't somehow come back to inform our experiences of lovemaking, of baby holding, of dog walking, of eating strawberries for the first time in the season. Okay, I lived in northern Minnesota. You all eat them. So if it doesn't somehow inform my experience of those things, it's irrelevant. That would be heresy in a lot of other traditions. Can we just say that? That's the point in some other traditions, not for Jews. You should eat with more joy and more satisfaction, understanding, liberating the sparks, understanding 15 minutes of meditation before you put it in your mouth. That should enhance your experience. You shouldn't just eat minimally and do all the other stuff. That is a really important part of understanding what Jewish mysticism is about. All right, so to get at this, you were all emailed that we were going to do a text tonight. Those of you who have been with us before anyway. Did all of you get the email about this text we're going to do tonight?
Starting page 67.
Yes, starting on page 67. Yes. Which gets us to our point. Thank you. Thank you.
Do you need the text?
I do. Page 67.
Yeah, you're getting it now. From Jewish mysticism and the spiritual life. Because the part we're going to start now is called Embodied. Part 3 of this book, Embodied Spiritual Practice. I was just with the Jewish Institute for Spirituality in a wise aging training. We want to start a wise aging group here at KI, maybe 2 if it's popular. Fantastically amazing experience that we're going to have. So I'll email all of you about that. So the Institute for Jewish Spirituality deals a lot in contemplative and mindfulness practices. Which we are reminded is an embodied practice. What you're getting is a piece of text from this book. Why is this in Jewish mysticism? How is this Jewish mysticism? This is Rabbi Abraham Yehoshua Heschel, the Ohev Yisrael. How does this have anything to do with mysticism? That looks suspiciously like a Hasidic text. Rabbi Renner says, you're teaching Chassidus tonight. That's a Chassidic text. What is that doing in a mysticism class? Hasidism is lived mysticism. It is a way, it takes its own teachers' teachings that are based in Kabbalah and brings it into present day life. How do we live this stuff? It's not in code. If you want me to do code with you, we'll do another class. Right? If you want me to do trigonometry with you, I can do that. I don't find trigonometry terribly helpful. But somebody who, like Richard, could take trigonometry and write this incredible, beautiful insight into Torah, which he's done, by the way, from a mathematical place. Oh my God, it blew me away. I had such a moment of things colliding and opening up. Oh my God. But it took Richard to do that for me. I could never look at math and look at Torah and go, oh, of course. Of course. Right? Long division right there in the Abraham narrative. Right? But Richard could do that because he's deeply steeped in those symbols and those concepts and brought a mathematical concept into the interpretation of Torah that blew me away. That's what Hasidism does with those coded texts that we don't know or understand much about. And they use Torah, right, as the lens. Because we all share access to that. Although we're going to say it might be a bit limited access. That we limit ourselves. Let's look at how. Someone read the first part of the Ohev Yisrael, please. Remember?
Remember what Amalek did to you, Deuteronomy 25:16. The Holy Torah admonished us concerning 4 remembrances. That is, you're obligated to remember at all times 4 things that are at the root and basis of the faith. The first is to remember constantly and at all times the assembly of the chosen at Mount Sinai. The other 3 are Miriam's punishment for her slander of Moses, the Sabbath, and the treachery of the Amalekites. That is, each Jew must consider each and every moment as the one at which he is standing at Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. For people are subject to past and future, but with respect to the Blessed One, there is no such distinction. And so each and every day, God is giving the Torah to God's people Israel.
Whoa! Okay, go on.
Thus, whenever a person opens any holy book in order to learn from it, he must then recall the assembly at Mount Sinai and imagine that he himself is receiving the Torah from on high. In that way, he will come to a state of fear and trembling, just as the Torah was given in fear and trembling, as it is written, all the people who were in the camp trembled. Exodus 19:16. Indeed, a person should feel trembling in all his 248 organs, which are collectively called the camp, as it is written, let your camp be holy.
All right. So that's uncoded. Can you imagine the code? Because thank God Rabbi Gordon Tucker is going to unpack this for us. But that was that was decoded. Do you know what that just said?
Decoded from what? Decoded from what?
Kabbalah. Mysticism. This is decoded mysticism. Okay, sure, now I'm clear. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Ohev Yisrael. Now I'm completely clear, right? So if this is decoded, imagine what coded looks like. All right? So we're going to need a contemporary of ours, Rabbi Gordon Tucker, to decode the decoded version. So Hasidism decodes for their students the Kabbalistic concepts, the mystical concepts, and embodies it more immediately and fully for their students. We are too far removed, even from the Hasidic tradition and our Torah tradition, to understand any of what this means without explication. All right. So this first point, this is one point, by the way. Remember what Amalek did to you. Do any of you remember this? That we're supposed to remember what Amalek did to us in the desert, and we're supposed to wipe out the name of Amalek. It's about a battle. Amalek attacked us. They attacked from the rear. Who's at the rear?
Women and children.
The women and children, the stragglers, the aged, the old, the sick, they're at the back. They can't move as quickly, and your defenders are up front. So Amalek attacked from the back. Heinous. Especially awful. Even in war. It's war crimes, right? Starting with the vulnerable. That's a war crime. So remember that, says Torah. Don't ever forget that, what Amalek did to you. All right, so is that what it means? God forbid. I mean, that's one level of what it means, but God forbid that should be it. Of course, there's a mystical tradition that tells us what that really means. What does that really mean? Why are we supposed to remember this so much? Because there's other things we're supposed to remember too. That's one of 4, right? So remember what Amalek did to you. The other is this business about Miriam, which we're not going to get into. Shabbat, right? And this, the fact that Torah, right, is given to us at Sinai. So if you say given to us at Sinai for us, that means one moment in time. God gives Torah. The people receive Torah. It's done. Because that's our temporal human experience. But in Kabbalah, we know that God is never ending. God is Ein Sof. God is, was, always will be. God is not just eternal, but what is the, Gordon Tucker uses the term like sempiternal.
Outside time.
Outside of time. So what does that mean? If God is outside of time, we experience Sinai as a moment in historical, blah, blah, blah year in the blah, blah, blah place. How does God experience it?
All at once.
All at once. What does that mean? Who said it always? Who said always? Laura Diamond. Thank you for being here. With a sick kid and husband out of town. Yeah. So
is he talking about vulnerability also?
So let's see. He seems to be suggesting that God has no experience in time. So for God, Sinai is eternal, which means Sinai is happening right now, all of the time. And because so much of this is that God doesn't change. God is the Ein Sof. God is the endless one that's always doing what God is doing, which is being God's perfect, amazing, wonderful self. God's not going to do one thing on Thursday and another thing next Tuesday. God is always doing God. And part of doing God is giving Torah. So that's happening all the time. Not one moment in time, God forbid.
I have an image for that.
An image for that?
Yeah, that I thought of. Okay.
Yeah?
Just assume that on the back of a piece of paper, you have the timeline of human history. Mm-hmm. Okay, so humans have been around for hundreds of thousands of years. And hopefully they'll be around for at least 5 billion, at which point...
If we get our act
together, 5 billion years from now, the sun gets big, and we're incinerated, but basically we're a long time. So you have a line with human history.
Right.
Take this piece of paper, turn it into a cylinder, put a light bulb inside. Light bulb is Ein Sof. Okay? Light bulb goes off. That's the transmission at Sinai. That's when God sort of, okay, I'm now going to release Torah to the world. Everybody on the line gets it at the same time, whether they're 500,000 years ago or 3 billion years in the future.
Beautiful image, right? So what Richard is saying is, here's the timeline of human history. We all exist on it, but God exists at the center of this. So when the light bulb inside goes boom, Torah, it's happening all across that timeline. Every moment in human history. Beautiful, beautiful way to get our heads around that. Thank you, Richard. So, right? So, okay. Great. Okay, what the heck?
Whether it's happened yet or not?
It's happening all the time. Here's the timeline of human history. Right. Sinai, let's say, is right here. Right. That's how we think about it. Sinai's here. So this is where Torah is given. But from God's perspective, in reality, meaning capital R, in reality, Torah is given in here.
Past, present, and future.
Correct. At every moment on that line.
All one.
So how are we read Torah every week, the same thing, around and around and around. So I think it's kind of cool, the whole concept, because
when you're in Torah study, you sometimes you really get you contemplate. You feel like you're there. It doesn't matter what it's myth. And what does it feel like? When those guys are behind us, ready to kill off. It's like you're there, and all the human stuff that's going on. So it kind of is logical.
So in an illogical way, it's logical.
Yeah,
right. In an illogical sense, it makes sense. Right, 100%.
About Torah.
100%. So, what is the implication? If Torah is being given all the time, every moment of human history, what is the implication? Sir?
Well, one, it's accessible.
It's accessible!
Everybody, all the time.
Because it's being given right now to all of us.
But to go on Dana's thought is that when we study year after year and read Torah and the same portions, there's always something new.
Ha 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 ha. Because it's ongoing. And we change. And so the Torah we receive when we change is a new Torah. Isn't it? It's the same words.
At the risk of being naive or uneducated, when I study Torah with our teachers, or when I'm reading this, I feel it's so smart. I mean, if you're constructing a religion, and I'm looking at it in that, like a
anthropological, right?
way, it's so smart.
We're nothing if not smart. Can I say that safely? Right in this room, as a tradition? All right. So we could spend 2 hours on this concept, and we'll come back to it if there's time and we want to say more, because it's going to weave into what happens next. But that's the kind of thing we're talking about. One mystical concept, one part of one mystical concept leads us into implications that are profound and far-reaching.
So there's one translation, and that is...
One translation? Tell me what that means.
Well, when Gordon Tucker says this is he's decoding it, we're going to just take that as a myth.
Okay, no. This is not the words of Gordon Tucker. This is the words of the Ohev Yisrael.
Okay.
The Ohev Yisrael is decoding a teeny part of some mystical concept.
So just as we spoke about that every time we read Torah, something else is a little bit different. Is that the same here? Or does this always remain what it's been decoded as?
Well, the Ohev Yisrael would say, you tell me, because you're receiving Torah right now.
Okay.
I'm not being smart. I mean,
No, it's...
literally,
yes.
He's saying, every time you open a holy book, and by the way, this is a holy book, right? These are holy texts. Every time you open a holy book, how are you supposed to experience it? As if you're standing at Sinai, receiving Torah. Well, only you can tell me the Torah you receive. That's the gorgeousness. Do you see the beauty and the revolutionary nature of this idea?
Yeah.
Beautiful. You could say God was, always will be, everything God is doing is code. Okay, whatever. Until you start to unpack it and understand the implication is, then revelation is ongoing. So that really, and if all the people were there, then it really means nobody has really, if you push this, which is what Hasidism was all about, if you push it, who doesn't have the monopoly? Tom?
Yeah, the thing is, though, that if you're getting revelation all the time, but like the Israelites at Mount Sinai, you don't want to get revelation.
Oh, Tom, you just earned the privilege of reading at the top of page 68.
No, all I'm saying is, if you read this, you see that they didn't want it.
Go on, please. Top of page 68, Tom.
All right. Amalek came to slaughter Israel at Rephidim, but Moses' hands grew heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him. Top. Exodus 17:8, 17:12. It is written in the book, Asara Ma'amarot, that had the Israelites not said to Moses, you go closer and hear all that the Lord our God says, and then you tell us, lest we die. And had they rather listened to the 10 utterances from the blessed presence directly, that being the 10 commandments, as it were, they would then not have had any need for the tablets of stone. Instead, the blessed presence would have bestowed on them a flow of great and pure wisdom and such great insight that the very hands of Moses themselves would have virtually become 2 tablets. And then his 10 fingers, 5 on the right side, 5 on the left, would have illuminated everything for Israel. In that way, they would have been able to apprehend the complete Torah. But since they rejected this out of hand and wished to hear God's word through an intermediary, their insight was diminished, and they then needed 2 stone tablets. So the point is, what this guy's saying is that most people don't want to bother with this stuff.
Exactly. Exactly right. So it belongs to everyone because everyone is always at the foot of the mountain. But what happens?
Only a few take it in.
Only a few want to take it in. Because what happened at Mount Sinai? What happened at Revelation? God started to speak, Anochi Adonai Elohechem. The first letter of the first word of the 10 utterances is what? The first letter of the first word.
Aleph.
Thank you, Bert. The first letter of the first word of the 10 commandments is Aleph. What sound does an Aleph make? Nothing. Silence. And they couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle it. Or, in my modern America 2014 hat, I won't repeat it outside of this room. If you repeat it, I'll deny it. It's a podcast now, isn't it?
Still time to say that.
What didn't
Thank you. But I'm going to say it anyway, of course. Is that not that they couldn't handle it, but I would say today they wouldn't handle it. They weren't interested. They're not interested in handling it.
I think that's another aspect of where one is so smart, it's so smart, but it also is so humanistic. Because this is, in our day and age, you call it a citizen breed that doesn't educate itself, which is death to democracy. And the beginning of this is such a democratization, making it available to everybody, but some people don't want to do the work.
The Sfada met Rabbi Yehuda Leib of Ger, one of our great Hasidic masters, said not only was it available to everybody, it had to be everybody who was there. Because had one of those minds been missing, Revelation would have been incomplete. It took the entire people of Israel for a complete revelation.
But Amy, wait a minute. Is this also not saying that if you refuse to pick up knowledge that's available, you endanger the whole civilization? Because here you have the Amalekites coming up from behind and almost demolishing the Hebrews. And, the Amalekites, they're the Saudis today, by the way. That's where they came from. They almost destroyed Israel, and the implication here is because most of the people didn't want it.
So this is a very coated version of the Hasidim saying exactly that, I think.
Right?
That they don't want to be too sharp about it, but the people in the room who would have been reading and studying the Ohev Yisrael are already people who have opted in.
So what does that say today about a 21% voter turnout?
I think it says really terrifying things about a 21% voter turnout. I think it says that God is screaming, vote, read, learn. No, of course. But remember, for biblical Israel, there was no difference between theocracy and democracy. I mean, for them, religion was politics. And for us as Reconstructionist Jews, Mordechai Kaplan said, if your politics don't have Jewish religion in it, they're missing something. And if your Judaism doesn't have American democratic principles in it, it's missing something. And that's what it means to live fully in two civilizations. And so if we as Jews are not voting, we are turning Moshe's hands to stone. So how does this text get read, which I think is gorgeous? Not from Moses' hands grew heavy, and so they took stone and put it under him, tachtav. The same word underneath can be used to mean in place of. They put stone in place of Moshe. And in place of his hands. His hands had every Israelite said, yes, I am ready for this experience. Yes, it's terrifying. Yes, I'm scared. Yes, I do not know what's happening to me. My mind might be coming apart, but I trust this force that led us out of suffering and oppression and slavery and made miraculous things happen, made my daughter come out of me alive and allowed me to live. Okay, obviously that's my experience, right? If I don't trust that and say, okay, I'm ready for how it's moving through me next and now, then if everybody had been ready to do that, then Moshe's hands would have been light. They would have been one example of Torah. Everybody's hands would have been like that, would have been illumined. Wow, right? Wow. What would a world look like where everyone allowed the one to move through them right now? The energy of healing, love, transformation, justice, compassion, empathy. What if that force moved? If we allowed that to move through us, and what it called us into right now, every moment, our hands would be lit up. This world would be lit up and changed. But because they shut down, I'm afraid, I don't understand, this feels strange, this feels too much, I'm overwhelmed, I don't want to. Instead, Moshe's hands held stone.
So we can blame the Jews for the horribleness of human
Ma pitom. That is not where they're going. I think they're talking about human nature. This is our experience of it. Other people have theirs, but this is our experience of what it means when we say, and it's happening every minute. Remember, this wasn't once upon a time. This is this afternoon. We said no this afternoon.
Because it was too much responsibility for the mass.
Jody, talk to me about what that means.
Well, you have to be ready to get the information, but I think that it was a lot easier, like it is today, to say, oh, why don't you go get the information, then you kind of bring it to me, and I'll listen to kind of part of it, but I wasn't really listening to all that, and they don't want to do the work. But it's not, that is what it is today, when, as somebody was just saying, it's exactly the same. Happens all the time when you say to somebody, oh, what did you think about this and this? And they say, oh, I didn't read it. Oh, well, the information's actually available to you, but I don't want to go get it. So it's a lot of responsibility to receive the information, because then you have to make choices, you have to vote, you have to make choices, you have to make decisions, and you have to affect change in the world.
So access to knowledge leads us, if we're gonna now know something differently, it leads us into responsibility to change, doesn't it? To not do things the way we did them before we knew that. Right? And for a lot of us, for most of us, they're writing to every single Jew that's ever lived and ever will, because they're all human. For humans, we don't love change. Especially when it's going to call me to change how I've been doing it, how I like to do it, how I thought I should do it, how I just felt like doing it in the moment. I don't like to own that, wait a minute, maybe I need to do it differently. What happens? I lose face. I didn't know everything. I wasn't the smartest and the best and perfect. And don't we hate that?
Well, it's getting rid of a false self.
It's getting rid of a false self. So, which leads beautifully into the big other way they blew it in the desert, which was what? One, according to this, was that they said to Moshe, you do it. You go get it, and then you tell us. What's the other way they really blew it in the desert?
Golden calf?
The golden calf. How does that connect to what you just said?
Well, I don't know.
Letting go of a false self, Bert. How does it connect to the golden calf? If we don't like to let go of a false self.
They didn't want to let go of the image of God, something physical.
They didn't want to let go of the old image of God that worked when they were slaves, that worked in Egypt, that still seems to be working just fine for the Egyptians, thank you very much, as we're schlepping through the desert. They didn't want to let go of what was no longer a real image. They knew the real image. The real image was what shattered a sea and had them move through, that brought darkness and plagues on Egypt. They knew that, they experienced that, but they still couldn't let go the false image that was so comforting and so tempting.
It's easier.
It's so much easier for us.
If you are informed by a divine light, you are called to make ethical choices. And every single action that you make, eating, every single thing, is informed with a weight that it did not have before. It's a lot easier to watch television, It's a lot easier to just switch it off.
Tell me how we talk about weight in Hebrew. Uh-oh. Are these dry erase markers? Whew, thank God. Okay. They would kill me in the religious school. Okay. All right. How do we talk about weight in Hebrew?
Kaved.
Kaved. And okay, I can't print to save my life. Kaved. So those of you who study Torah with me, you know something about where I'm going. What does it mean? Kaved. Wait, what does that mean? What is it related to?
Kavod.
Kavod.
Significance.
Significance. Glory. The divine glory. Respect. Weight in Hebrew is kavod. Honor your father and your mother. Kibud et av va'em. Treat them as if they have weight, as if they matter. That is God's glory, God's kavod, God's weightiness in the world. That is the word for respect. So if right now everything that I know something about in terms of ethics and morals and values, now everything I do has a different weight. And I bring a different kavod. I bring a sense of kavod, of respect to things in a way I didn't before.
It is not human, though, to spend you can do it for part of your life, maybe after you're 40, but to do it your whole life, it's not humanly possible. And even at the end, when people grow weak, like Moses even, you can't do it, you can't continue it.
So for sure, I hear you saying that the mystics had some understanding of human nature in that until you're 40, forget about it. Like, you can go through the motions, but it really doesn't really sink in until 40, which was a lot closer to the end for a lot of them, right? They were very aware that it was closer to the end for a lot of them than it would be for us. 50 is the new 40. But I believe that they would say, we engage with this for the rest of our lives until the moment of our death at our choice. Do we choose it all the time? Of course not. We're human. Do we need to be engaging in ways that call us into it more frequently? You better believe it. Or you can just live a regular observant Jewish life. Okay. Right? Give tzedakah, go visit the sick, go to every funeral, no matter what you're doing, drop what you're doing, go to a funeral procession. If you just, like Shabbat, you do all the things you're supposed to do as an observant Jew, that's okay, that's fine. This isn't for everybody. But if you really want, and what God really wants, is for us to say yes. I'm listening.
That's more than that. It's to act. To act with the respect
Because if we really receive it, it will affect how we behave.
Exactly.
If we really receive it.
Exactly.
It has to.
Exactly.
There's no way we could now do certain things without the weight of knowledge, of understanding of what the right thing and the wrong thing is to do. Now if I do the wrong thing, I do that with a weightiness, that I didn't do before I knew it was wrong.
Or you lower the respect, and therefore you create the space to go back to doing it.
Or I lower respect for myself. Because every time I make a choice against my own understanding of what's right and wrong, I influence my opinion of myself.
And you distance yourself.
And I distance myself from myself, meaning my self, capital S, and from the divine self. Every time I do that. All right. What time are we at?
8:10.
8:10. How does that? 8:15. How does that happen? Time flies when you're having fun. I love Ruben. 8:15 is the new 7:30. Thank you, Mr. Elias. That's hilarious. All right, I want to go to a few points made by Rabbi Tucker, who's an incredible speaker and a wonderful teacher. Let's go to, I want to go to his second point. Not the first part about God being eternal. All right, let's go to the middle of page 70. And go to the sentence, like the first third of the page, where it says Asara Ma'amarot. You see parentheses and you see some italics, right? That's an easy place to find, right? Okay. So I'm going to go to the beginning of that paragraph, or the beginning of that sentence. The Ohev Yisrael paraphrases Rabbi Menachem Azariah of Fano's words in Asara Ma'amarot, that if only the Israelites had been willing to listen more directly to God rather than asking for an intermediary, the 10 commandments would have gone directly into their 10 fingers, just as they had into the 10 fingers of Moses, and from there into their very existence and substance. They would have apprehended an intuitive truth, as it were, and we're going to drop down to the next sentence. Well, actually, in our innermost being and inscribed within us would have been God's teaching. The embodiment of revelation that is offered us in these remarkable depictions reminds us of the descriptions in both Scripture and in later sacred literature of the physical effects of prophetic encounters. This was to have happened, we are taught, with the Israelites at Mount Sinai, but it did not happen as it was intended to. Instead, our ancestors at Mount Sinai asked Moses to be their intermediary. Go down to where it says, how different inert stone is as a receptacle for God's Torah from the living, organic, innermost being of the human receiver encountering the eternal and timeless. We can go to a page. Yes, we can go to a page. We should. That's what we got given. We got given the tablets. We got given teachers to explicate it. We got given this page. We got given Torah. Of course we should go to it. And what happens when the teaching, when we encounter directly, this teaching is lovely. What happens when we encounter directly the experience of being filled with the divine? Directly. That is a different experience. And it changes us. It deeply changes who we are, how we behave, what choices we make, how we are spirit embodied. And that was the original intention. We don't have it possible then, but it's possible right now because it's happening all the time. So the challenge is, are we ready to change our minds? Or are we still going to send Moshe? Are we still going to say the only place to find any of this business is here and then the rabbi has to explicate it for us? Nothing should stop doing that. That's a wonderful thing. And what it should, I believe, which is the point of bringing these texts, because I believe Gordon Tucker thinks the same thing, Rabbi Tucker, is that by bringing them, by engaging with them, is that you go home and sometime next week, right, something opens differently. Something opens in a different way. And it's your direct experience of that godliness in that moment that God wants.
You know, listening to this whole talk, it's almost like the stone becomes a blockage to a channel and prevents the flow from entering it. And once that's blocked, do whatever you want and live with the consequences.
If we block it up, right? So,
The spirit dies.
It can. In terms of how it's enacted and how it acts in the world. The spirit, God forbid, never dies. But certainly how we behave can be uninformed by our neshama, by our soul, by our connection to the divine, to that divine spark within us.
Talk a little about how the thoughts you've just been talking about, you've just been discussing, are marked difference between Judaism and Christianity and some other religions.
I'm not sure. I don't think I know enough about Christian mysticism, to know.
About mysticism, but like the Catholics need a priest for an intermediary.
So it is clear that the Kabbalistic tradition, which starts very early, by the way, it's very early. Ezekiel are the first Kabbalistic texts we have. Merkavah, Chariot mysticism are the first mystical texts we have. It's very early. So in those early mystical texts, it's already a tension with the whole idea of a priesthood, right? Which is there in our tradition. So definitely this comes out of the understanding that an intermediary, the priest, is not ultimately what they're teaching is the best answer. Even as they fantasize about the rebuilding of the third temple, really
So this is post tearing down the temple.
So there are already at the second temple period, there are already stirrings and movements against the priesthood. There's a thriving community in Babylonia after the first destruction of the first temple. They don't come back. So they stay over there saying, oh yes, the temple's great, the priesthood is great, and here's our taxes. Right? Here's our money to make sure that the lights stay on in that KI place. Lahavdil. Okay, let's distinguish KI from it. But, right, that we'll send money for everything, but they didn't come back. They didn't participate in a priest-run Judaism, because it wasn't Judaism, it was, biblical cult religion. They didn't participate in the cult. They stayed in Babylonia, where the model was the academy, where the model was every mind was offered the opportunity to study these texts, and every male mind was offered the opportunity to dig in and study these texts and figure out how to live it in their own lives. That's already happening when there's still a priesthood. So we had that going on, and then the priesthood fell with the destruction of the second temple, and what was already flourishing and what then won the day because of historical events was this non-intermediary, non-intercessory Judaism.
I have a question when you ask about the difference in Christianity, and isn't one of the major differences that when we pray directly to God, that they have to pray, I think, I don't know that much about it, to Jesus, or they don't pray directly to God, and it's almost like that's not wanting to get the Ten Commandments.
Well, they can pray directly to God the Father. They can pray to the Holy Spirit. I mean, I don't think it's that they can't. I mean, I sometimes envy them. They have a lot of help.
Yeah.
There are days, can I just tell you? Right? There's days that I'm one of these people. There's a lot of days I'm schlepping through the desert. Going, really? I'm supposed to have some awesome, wondrous, amazing, life-opening and changing where I'm going to have to let go of a false self? Really? I don't think so. Somebody do it for me, please, and just tell me how many shmas I have to say. How many v'ahavtas, right? Just let me know what it is how many mezuzahs I have to kiss, and then I'm done.
Give me the bullet points.
Give me the bullet points, and don't make me give anything up about, right? My own deep, and I'm not saying that other people don't. I'm just saying, for me, there's days I long, and I get why an intermediary, an intercessory figure is really helpful. It's hard for us. This is hard.
It's hard work.
It's hard work, and it is work. By the way, what is the word for service of the divine? Avodah. What's the word for work? Avodah. What's the word for slave? Eved. Right? It is not easy, this work. And it doesn't have to be as hard as we make it. It's as close as the next bite of food. It's as close as the next time we smell a child's head that we love. It's as close as the memory of my grandmother's rugelach baking. Right? It's that immediate. We complicate it so much that if we could trust and be willing to allow the trembling, to stay with the fear, to stay with the resistance, to stay through it, it doesn't have to be awful. Yeah.
It seems like a counterintuitive process. I mean, I'm not sure that all the Hebrew translations line up with the English language that we're talking about, but as soon as you push at it, it becomes heavy, it becomes weight, it becomes difficult, it becomes a burden. If you go with the flow and you sort of drop it and let it happen, you get lightness of being, you get vision, you get ease, it flows through you. It's a counterintuitive process of letting go. So it's just, like I said, I don't know if the Hebrew matches, but at least in English it starts to be this counterintuitive.
Doesn't have to be Hebrew for us to get that we get in our own way. We resist. And it's the resistance that's so hard, Rabbi Renner.
I just wanted to uplift what the word Kabbalah means in Hebrew.
Please.
It means receiving. Like in Israel, if you were to get a receipt for something, it's also called a Kabbalah. That this point that you're making, Natalie, about not pushing it so hard, but perhaps letting it come to you. It is about receiving it in this way. It is what we receive, packed into that Hebrew word itself.
Right? So the work of really being able to do this is to receive it. Receive it, capital I. Are we ready to receive it?
Even the word trembling can be reframed as vibrating, and then if you happen to be into physics and know about string theory, everything in the universe comes down to vibrating strings. Everything we talk about, divine emanations and resonances with different things, and so the what they talk about, the Sinai experience making the entire camp tremble. What really happens with a truly Sinai experience is everybody begins to resonate along with the rest of the universe.
See what I said about math and physics, and of course it's Torah, right? So when we start to vibrate, we start to resonate, right? Things change, but boy, that's unsettling, right? When we're not, and then when we start pushing against it, then we complicate it even further.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. The trembling and the receiving can be the most wonderful thing. Like when you meditated, you breathe in and you're breathing God's breath, whatever. But it can also be terrifying because it's so big. And I was thinking, at Sinai, maybe they didn't want the responsibility, whatever, but part of it, or maybe most of it, could have been
after seeing all these miracles, to take something that big and that powerful in is really frightening.
If you've ever fallen in love, how terrifying is that? If you've ever loved a child that's vulnerable, oh my God, your heart's running around out there all of a sudden. Like, what? If you ever loved a puppy, to really take in those powerful experiences of love leaves us incredibly vulnerable, leaves us busted open in ways that make us really nervous. And when we have those experiences of love, and it doesn't have to be whatever kind of, you just, getting it, like those of us who had moments in meditation or in chanting or in services, imagine that. Right in there in that other room, when we have those, they're hugely disturbing, right? They disturb the status quo. They disturb the way things are. If we can stay with it, the possibility is that we then become transmitters of something incredibly world-changing.
It's very rewarding if you can get there.
That's right.
But it's a surrender. All the stuff that we keep ourselves from getting hurt is really, we keep ourselves from feeling.
We can't receive when we're defended. We have to be ready to surrender. Reuben?
I just want to know whether this Ohel Yisrael is a Kabbalistic writing.
He is a Hasidic teacher, and Hasidism takes the teachings of Kabbalah and brings them into what they thought was a more everyday application. It's their thoughts on Kabbalistic thoughts.
So this Ohel Yisrael is the first decoding, as you said earlier?
It's one decoding.
Okay.
There are lots of decodings. All right, let's close with this last paragraph on page 71. The double juxtaposition we have seen here of Amalek and Revelation is meant to remind us of the dangers that lurk when we fear or dismiss religious experience, when we close our bodies off to the intimacy of feeling the divine presence, and when we are satisfied with intermediaries, be they great leaders or great texts. So we'll take a moment. Don't get in your heads. Just take a minute. If you're comfortable closing your eyes to shut out all the visual distraction, I'll invite you to do that. Take a moment just to feel your body in the chair, your feet on the floor, your groundedness to this planet of which you are a part. You are a creature of this world, connected by gravity, pulled to this earth, of this earth, connected to every other living being, every other thing, every other person in this world. Sensing your weight in the chair, kaved, your own weightiness. You matter. Sensing the breath as it enters the torso. Noticing that it enters and leaves of its own miraculous happening. The mystics teach us, our rabbis teach us, that we are breathed by God. We do not breathe. We are breathed. It happens. It is a gift. Just noticing the heart beating, the miracle of every cell being healed by oxygenated blood coming to it. Letting the shoulders drop away from the ears, relaxing fully into being here right now in this moment. The incredible, amazing gift of silence. Intentional, holy, communal silence. The eyes being soft in the head. The brow unknitting. The top of the head, keter, the crown, according to Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. We are each an embodiment of the 10 sefirot. We are a microcosm, each one of us. Keter, at the crown, we are open to receiving the abundant love, healing, compassion, transformative shefa, abundance, that is the divine filling the cosmos and filling every cell of our being. This is the unmitigated experience of the divine as it moves through this learning community in our holy and sacred space. Acknowledge yourselves for giving yourself the gift of this hour and a half together, and carry this immediacy forward that it might bless your interactions for the next 24 hours at least. Erev Tov, have a wonderful evening.